We're live. I'm a little late. I'm still in the sevens, though. It says technically it's 7:56, so I'm not even an hour late. But tonight was date night, so I had to go out with my lovely wife, Lisa. It was fantastic. Um, we needed a we needed a nice night out. She's been teaching all week, and I don't know if you know anything about teaching, but it's no picnic. So it's fantastic to be able to go out with her and see my family, come home and spend time with the puppies and all that stuff. But right now, it's time to get online and talk to people about car stuff. So that's awesome. The thumbnail that I have up right now is of the 0304 Cobra air to water intercooler, and it's the one that came with the crate motor that I got from the guys from Ford Racing. Although, you get those with any of these motors. So if you had one of these Terminator motors, they're very cool. Or if you had one of the motors out from something and you got it from the wrecking yard, you got really lucky. Obviously, the motors are still out there running around. People are doing them. The reason that I use that photo is because it shows in pretty good detail the air to water intercooler. It's fairly common now. I think they did a similar thing with the Shelbys and other stuff. If you see what they did was basically attach the air to water intercooler core, kind of a little brick, attach that core to the bottom side of the positive displacement supercharger. If any particular supercharger can use an air to water intercooler or any kind of intercooler, it's a positive displacement supercharger. Probably the one voted most likely to heat up the air, a positive displacement root supercharger. Kind of the hot man on the totem pole. I know guys are going to complain about that, but it is reality, especially when guys try to turn them up. And that's what we want to talk about tonight. And that's the fact that, okay, look, right off the bat, the nice thing about having a factory supercharged car or factory turbo car is that the factory built in, obviously, a safeguard. So if they have in this case, let's say it's 390 horsepower. If they produced a 390 horsepower motor, they know that they wanted that 390 horsepower to last 100, 200, 300,000 miles. Probably they weren't planning on 300,000 miles on that particular motor, but they do last a long time. And so they've built a lot of extra strength and longevity into it. What that means for us is that it also means that we can turn it up. And we're not asking it to last 300,000 miles anymore when we turn it up, but it should still last a long time. The thing is that they've also built in extra capacity for the supercharger in this case. And also the topic of our discussion for tonight, the intercooler. So we know already from having tested these many, many times that if you take this factory supercharger, I think it's a 112 on that particular application, we take that and we do what you're supposed to do with any factory supercharger. We change the pulleys on it and spin it faster, either put a bigger crank pulley on it or a smaller blower pulley. And so we're changing the drive ratio between the crankshaft and the supercharger and spinning the supercharger faster relative to the motor. So we increase the airflow capacity, the pumping basically capacity of the supercharger, and it produces more airflow for every revolution and produces more boost and more power. That's the ideal situation. The downside to that thing when we run that type of supercharger is that, any type of supercharger, when we go up in boost, we also go up in charge temperature. So more boost equals more heat. So you're going to have more heat coming out of that supercharger, and which is why these things have a factory air to water intercooler on them, which works very well. This particular one has a separate system, meaning that they don't share hot engine, radiator water, because what good would it do to cool a charge air that's, let's say, 200 degrees or 250 degrees even, and try to cool it with 200 degree water? That just doesn't make any sense. So it's much better to cool it with cool 200 degree air with 100 degree or less than 100 degree, some sort of ambient water. So what you have is, in the air to water intercooler, you have the core itself, under which I'm showing in that photo in the thumbnail. You can take a look. That's what the heated charge air from the blower passes through. And then normally what you'd have is some kind of reservoir that holds the majority of the water, but the rest of the system also holds the water. So the reservoir and a little fill and the return line in the reservoir. And then you also have a pump somewhere in there that circulates the water. And then usually somewhere in there also you have a secondary heat exchanger. So when the water goes through the intercooler and gets heated up by the hot charge air when you're under boost, then that heated water comes out and goes through another secondary heat exchanger, usually mounted in front of the radiator. So as you're driving and you get cold air, ambient air going across that, it takes the heat back out of it, and voila, it's ready to be recirculated and then ready to do more cooling. Here's the thing, just like with the supercharger was sized to produce a given power level. So they chose it for longevity and cost and response rate and its ability to produce whatever desired power level that they wanted for that particular application. In this case, let's say it was 390 horsepower. We know the supercharger will do a lot more than that. We know that because when we run one of these motors on the engine dyno, it makes a lot more than that. And also when we spin the supercharger, it makes a lot more than that. So let's say that we could make, 600 or 650 horsepower with the supercharger. So there's that much more capacity there. When we do that and spin the blower faster, especially if we don't do things like putting cams and ported head and things like that in there, where we actually bring the boost pressure down by improving the efficiency of the motor, then the boost pressure goes up, we spin the blower faster, more heat. And then, so we're asking the intercooler now, when we've done this, to do two things. One, we're feeding it much hotter air. So it was designed to run with given parameters in terms of heat. So how much heat is going in versus how much heat I can reject. Also, when we're spinning the blower faster, in addition to running hotter air, we're also running more air. So we're asking this thing to now flow more and get rid of more heat. It was designed to do, again, both of those things within a given package. And now we're asking it to do way more. As we talked about earlier, there is more capacity in the system for it to be able to adjust to that, but only a certain amount. You can't take that intercooler core, which is designed to have a flow rate and a heat rejection capacity for, let's say 600 horsepower. It might be more than that. But as we go up in airflow and we go up in temperature, the efficiency of that intercooler goes down. It starts not flowing as well, and it starts not rejecting the heat as well. It starts not cooling the air nearly as well. And so both of those things go down. So the cure for that is, and what a lot of guys have done on this particular thing, is what they'll do is, we just need to circulate more water. That's good. You do need to circulate more water. If you can get more cold water going through there, then you can get more cooling and take away some of that heat. That's good. That doesn't fix the flow rate of the airflow that you're trying to process through that core. It doesn't fix that. So all of let's put a bigger reservoir. We need more water. Okay, we need more water. We need a more pump because we now have more water, and we're going to now put a bigger secondary heat exchanger in, so the recovery rate will be better. We have a bigger reservoir so that we have more transfer medium, and then now we have a bigger pump so we can circulate that more transfer medium that's been cooled by the better secondary heat exchanger, so that we can cool that all better. That's great. Still haven't fixed the problem. We still don't have a core that's sized for a lot more power and a lot more airflow. So we're trying to secondarily fix the problem by not fixing the problem. What it needs is a much bigger core. In this case, it's kind of hard to do, to put a much bigger core in there, because one of the problems and one of the design elements of this thing was that, you have a certain packaging constraint. So when you're making this within this motor, underneath the supercharger, housed inside essentially the V of the motor, in this case, housed inside a common lower manifold, you have a given amount of room, because you want the air to be able to go. It has to go from the supercharger down through the core. There has to be room between the bottom of the core and essentially the bottom of the intake manifold. The air has to go down through that, has to come out from underneath the intercooler core, and then make its way up and turn again to go into from the intake manifold into the cylinder heads. It's got to be able to do all that, right? So again, if we make the core deeper, we're lessening the flow and making that turn more problematic. If we make it wider, we make it hard for the air to go by on the other side. There's just all sorts of design element problems that, look, this thing was packaged to make us to do a certain thing. They did a good job. It's very, very efficient at doing what it's doing. In fact, it's efficient enough to do even more, just not all of it. You won't be able to make, it's not going to be nearly as good as trying to have it process, let's say, 1,000 horsepower worth of airflow and boost, especially if we're running very, very high boost. We're not going to make that with that factory supercharger. You just can't spin it fast enough to do that. And it would be terribly hot if you were trying to do that. And that's the problem with these kinds of things. If you're with this size supercharger, it can't process that much air. And when you start asking it to process near its limit of flow, what happens is you'll have a rise in air temperature when we go up in blower speed and boost. And then all of a sudden, this rise will just rocket straight up. It will just get terribly inefficient. Everything will get terribly hot. It will stop being an effective air mover. And it'll just be an air heater, which is not a good idea. We don't get any more power like that. We just get detonation and we get cavitation. We get all kinds of bad things. So what you need to do is put a bigger core, but it's not, like I said, it's not as easy as all that, because there just isn't room to do that. So sometimes there just isn't. Sometimes the answer is get rid of that supercharger assembly and put a better supercharger on it, something that allows you to put a bigger core in it. Well, yeah, you could stack things up and make the supercharger higher, giving you more room to put more of a core in there. Then you have hood clearance problems. So as you can see, there's really no free lunch. So it becomes difficult. That's why externally packaging these intercoolers becomes the way that a lot of people go. And that's why when we're running stuff, we run these external air-to-water intercoolers on these turbo things and on the supercharger things, especially on the positives or on the centrifugal supercharger stuff, which packages like a turbo. We're directing the air from the supercharger to an air-to-water intercooler and then finally into some intake manifold. It becomes a little bit harder on some of the positive displacement stuff. But if you're packaging a big supercharger, for instance, if you're putting a big supercharger on top of a Holley low ram or Holley high ram, then that gives you a little bit more leeway to package in because you have a supercharger that's that big. You are also going to need an intercooler that's that big. And we've seen some of these big sandwiched intercoolers between a high ram and a low ram and some kind of supercharger, or even an inlet on top of that, that we're now blowing air into. And that stuff works good. So the moral of all this, make sure that your intercooler, first of all, you should be running an intercooler. And yes, I'm talking to you E85 and methanol guys. You should be running an intercooler. And if you are, you should be running one that's sized to do to work with the combination of airflow and boost that you plan on running. Obviously, you can wiggle both of those things. If you run a more powerful and bigger combination, you run less boost, so you have less temperature going in, but you will have the same amount of flow going in. But you can, instead of putting 300-degree air in, if you can put 250-degree air in by lowering the boost, making the NA motor more efficient, or even 200-degree air in, you can make the combination more efficient and put less boost in, and that, therefore less temperature. You make life easier on the intercooler. Let's see what you guys got going on this Friday night. Working on a pole. Pick an air to water intercooler over an air to air intercooler. I gotta get one of those A's, get the A out of here. And then while you're up there answering the poll, the other thing I want you to think about is one of the things I'm thinking about doing, or I'm going to try to do, is we've been talking about doing this, this 24-hour marathon deal, the live feed marathon. And the way that I want to do it is not like what I'm doing now, where we're just going live on YouTube. I want to stream it. And so I want to have guests on. So I want to do, a 24-hour guested marathon. So for each section, that each segment that I do, each 1 hour segment, I'd like to try to have at least one other guest on. So, we have a list of normal people that I would want to be on there. I would want, Chad and Brian Tooley and Matt over at Sloppy. And so give me a list of people that you guys might like to see, that you think would come on and at least be here for a little while. They don't have to be here the whole time. They're not going to be here. I'm not asking them to be here for 24 hours. I'm just asking them to come on for one segment. So they come on for one segment. I could talk to them. Maybe Nelson, maybe Tom Nelson, maybe Steve Morris, who I think is really cool. I don't really know him, but his stuff is very, very cool. So that would be kind of awesome. Maybe have a camera that's like actually effective, like that. Ta-da! So let me know who you guys think. Calvin would be awesome. There's a lot of good people out there. My buddy Jimmy from HP. Maybe Oliver would be. Oliver actually could just come over and sit in, which would be awesome because he's close enough. 24-hour stream now, not right now. My intercooler is larger than my radiator. That's what we like to hear. I don't think you can't oversize your intercooler. We don't have to worry about that. What size intercooler would a mostly stock Trailblazer SS with a 76 millimeter require? Are you wanting to do an air to air or an air to water? If you look at the size of the air to waters that we run, they're fairly small. An air to air, it would be like this by like this. Cobra intercooler brick looks near identical to the one on my Roush M90. It might be comparable. Maybe the same company does it. Chillers that work through factory air conditioning. Yeah, they have those. Turbo start with the E85 and then go to air to water. The E85 will cool temps and give you more stability overall. Plus you get more horsepower off the bat. Wish E85 was available in New York. Are you running E85 with water methanol injection? And you should be able to run a lot of boost on that thing then. Anybody else watching 6 week cars that ran last week? What's a reasonable price on a running for truck motor? From the wrecking yard, they're about $500 or $600. Supercharger, what are your average inlet air temperatures? Air to water isn't street friendly. I disagree with that. Having run air to waters on the street a lot, it works fine, works great. Lots of the OEM stuff is air to water. 160 degrees at 20 psi. I don't drive it far, 1 mile from work. You have 160 degree air after the intercooler with water meth and an intercooler? That seems really high. Or is it just, and 160 coming out of the turbo wouldn't be right at 20 psi either. So that's either very, very high or very, very low. Our top sportsman car with 1471, we could see the efficiency boost drop off after a few races at 30% over the crank. That's overdriven a lot on a supercharger. It would jump to 38%, would help for a bit until we had time to refresh. Did my first lunchbox locker install today with the 68 Impala. Nice. How do you do an intercooler with a draw-through setup? You don't normally. Most diesel pickups have a bigger intercooler than the radiator. That's where we used to get a lot of the air-to-air stuff that we use. We used to get them from the Ford turbo diesels, and you could buy them right from Ford, and they were cheap. Lucky would be another good one. Actually, I'd love to have Alex Taylor on too. I met her at the MPMC conference, and she's the right kind of people. She was hilarious to be around. It's never easy to keep up with Chad and I when we get together. She did fantastic. The new Godzilla and boost had some problems. I think that was just that particular example. My inlet errors were 130 to 140 to start with, and would go to 180 over 5 seconds. This is with the 85 plus 30 gallon per hour methanol at 20 pounds of boost. Now they stay around 70 degrees with an air to water intercooler. Yeah, it's hard to get accurate inlet air temperatures if you're running E85 as fuel through the injector, because that's really normally just going to go into the cylinder head and into the combustion chamber. So we don't know what the charge temperatures are, at least not in the intercooler. Poll. I was looking at that. Must I click on it? Cold air makes more power. That's definitely true. And when we're talking about cold air with intercoolers and stuff, make sure you start with cold air, not hot air taken directly behind the radiator or in the engine compartment. Make sure your turbo thing is grabbing cold air. Tom Nelson is good. I've talked to Tom a few times on the phone. He's good people. So are we twin charging today? Not today. David Freiberger would be good. David's really good people. David's done way more than people even know about. James Charles, I don't know who that is. The Steves. Lucky would be good. I haven't met Lucky in person, but I have talked to him on the phone. He's good people. Is there a formula to figure out what size intercooler to run on a 6-liter and a single turbo? It's not the 6-liter and the single turbo. It's actually the power output. You could have some phone interviews. I know, and I thought about that because I could do this while I'm calling people on the phone and talk to them, but you guys don't get to see them. There's not interaction, which the way that there should be. Perfect timing for the poll. Kuwait Brule. Yeah, Brule would be another good one. And actually, Ish or Eric and those guys at the Troy would be awesome too. I'd love to have Troy on. Troy is actually the guy. Troy gets a lot of stuff done at West Tech. He's awesome. All the people at West Tech are awesome. Steve Relay, Freiberger, Slock Mechanics. Yeah, that's Matt. Matt's good people. Admiral, if we could coordinate and get my dad on it to talk about some 70s and 90s, 70s through 90s OG street racing. Ronnie Coleman. I don't think Ronnie Coleman probably knows who I am. Most diesel pickup trucks have big intercoolers. Nick from Nick's Garage, and I don't know Nick, but I do follow his stuff. I like his stuff. David Freiberger's in Southern California, but 10.7 to 1 static compression. How much boost can I run? E85 with an intercooler and 427 Windsor multi-port. You could run a lot, especially with an intercooler. Wrecking yards, Austin, shouldn't be empty on big block Chevys. Maybe in your area that they are, but there's usually a lot of big blocks in vans, SUVs, and trucks. Byron from VSR would be good. And also, trying to think. Force Performance, too, is another guy that I would like to have on here. Yeah, Byron Singh. Derek from Vice Grip, that would be another good one. I don't know Derek, but I really like his stuff. And I love the Project Farm stuff. The guys from Garage 54, I think, are awesome. Like to see a Coyote Big Bang. That would be awesome. They're just expensive. Tony's another good guy too. I don't know Tony, but I've interacted with him, and Tony's doing cool stuff over there. David Vizard would be good too. It'd be hard to probably schedule that with his health, but Cat from Mustang Life would be a good guess. He does all sorts of swaps. I don't know him. It's not Kenny Bell. It would be Jim Bell was the owner of Kenny Bell. He's since sold that now. At what point would a street-driven turbo car want to make a change to air to water from air to air? If you're, I don't know that you'd necessarily have to do that on a street car. On a drag race car, I definitely would. If you have a carb manifold converted to EFI, is it okay to drill and tap under the base plate to mount the map sensor? So you want to put it under the bottom of the plenum? We just drill a hole in the side of the carburetor pad and put a fitting, and then run like a vacuum fitting, a barb fitting, and then just run a line over to a map sensor. It's really easy. I don't know who Cliff is. Oh, Kenny Detlerweiler. And I know Kenny. Kenny is awesome. John Causey is also awesome. Jeff Smith. There's lots of good guys. An interchiller. Think of putting on a fast LSX RT, and my Gen 353 currently has a TBSS manifold. Thinks it's worth it, and pretty sure I'll need to retune it. Right? You might need to, if you're going from a Trailblazer SS to the fast, you're going to need to add fuel at the top, but it might do that already if it's a mass air deal. I don't know. I don't know about it actually in the car. We add fuel when I'm doing it, but because we're not running closed loop. Kamikaze. I have met Chris. We did a nitrous shootout out at West Tech one time. Richard, that's mine. It's out of a 99 7.3 Power Stroke. Has been altered to fit the Metro nose. You have that intercooler on a Metro. That's giant. Uncle Tony had me on his thing, and I'd like to have him, but for some reason he's pissed off. He thinks somehow we slighted him because I did an actual test of piston flipping, and he did not like the results. So he's all got his panties in a bunch. You got phone interviews. Yep. Alan, some of you guys on here like to see a turbo comparison on a 4V 4.6 liter. I know Richard has done it before, but it'd be nice if it was a modular and something other than a 5.3. I think I've run on a 4.6 4 valve. I've run 46 millimeter twin 46s and twin 57s are as much as I've tested on there. Oliver, Steve Dulcich would be good. Steve is. I like Steve a lot. He does good stuff. And we could talk about, he could help school me on all things Mopar, although he's great at like paint and body. He's amazing at. He does lots. He does transmission rebuilds. He does everything. I have an overheating issue with my 351 turbo setup I need to try and address. Is it a bad, I mean, you got to check all the normal things. Check the water pump flow, check the radiator, check the connections, check the thermostat, check the fan and the shroud. Those are all things to look at. And then if the cooling system is right, then check and make sure that you don't have a head gasket problem or something. Set it up like Matt does. Yeah, I just don't know what program he's using to do those interviews. LT would be good. He used to be with Power Nation. Peg from Zip Ties and Bias Plies. I don't know Peg. My dad said be happy to join the stream. David Weiser would be good. I talk to David quite often. He is really good. Billy Godbold would be another. I love Billy. He's fantastic. You could rent some cheesy ballroom and some hotel and have a live audience. Can you bring them over on a Zoom call? You can't really. I don't think I could do more than one. I haven't used Zoom more than the 40-minute thing that they have on the free deal. One of David's stories could easily last an hour. Boosted Boys would be cool. I don't know them, but yeah, I really like their stuff. Yeah, Oliver, if you're talking about dulcets, yeah, he is real world, and and that's what he said. Whenever I talked to him about it, he said, "Look, I had to learn all that stuff. I didn't have any money." He said, "So I had to know how to do it. If my transmission was broke, I had to learn how to fix it because I couldn't pay somebody to fix it." Jeremy at Faster Proms, yep. There's lots of good guys out there. Compressor outlet's 3.5, and the throttle body is 4. Would you run 4-inch inlet and outlet on the air-to-air intercooler? Does 3.5 up to the throttle body maintain better velocity? You should not worry about velocity and stuff on the intercooler, and you can step that up either way. You can step it up from 3.5 because you're ultimately the choke point is going to be the little thing. So, and a 3.5 in and out of an intercooler is pretty good size. The fact that the throttle body is 4-inch doesn't make any difference. If the throttle body was only 3-inch, it would still be okay under pressure. So that's not going to matter. So you can step it up either at the throttle body, or you can step it up to 4-inch coming out of the intercooler. It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter for what you're doing. The guy from CompCams, that was Billy. He's not with CompCams anymore, though, although he was there a long time. Pat from Power Nation. I don't know Pat. Brian Tooley was one of the first guys that we mentioned. Rob would be good too. I don't know Rob, but I would like to meet him. I know Emily and her husband they're good people too from Flying Sparks. Kevin from CSU, another good guy. Yep, I have had Kevin come over and help us with some stuff. What modern car would you choose to do a V8 swap in like they did in the 70s and 80s? I would like to see, and maybe not a V8, maybe a V6, but I'd like to see a Chevette. But if I had one, although I don't think I would do a V8 in it, I'm a big fan of Metropolitans, but I think that the engine that I would put in there would be a twin cam Toyota, though. It'd be a 4AG. John Mahovitz is really good too. Yep. Johnny M. John is really fun to hang around with. He's just a cool guy to be around. I try to spend as much time as I can with him. He came over the other day and told us a hilarious story about a trip that he had recently to 7-Eleven. Oh, he gets himself in so much trouble. But John was really cool because he's the guy that does AccuFab. But he used to go out with us, and we'd all go out. The guys from West Tech and Mahovitz would go out. We'd go out and we'd go out to the go-kart track that's local there, and we'd all meet out there. And it gets pretty aggressive out there, I'll tell you. The guys have no problem driving right over the top of you. And so it got pretty aggressive. It gets so much so that they would not let anybody else come with our group. So if there were 8 or 10 cars or whatever that they would send out all at one time, and they would tell other people, look, you guys really will just want to wait this one out. You don't want to be out here with this group. It was a lot of fun though. Yeah, Mike, Kenny Detweiler to me is a lot like I got to meet John Lingenfelter, and John Lingenfelter was one of the guys that in this industry, a guy that I got to meet that was everything that I thought he was going to be. When you read about him, you're obviously reading the highlights or whatever. It's like looking at somebody on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and saying, "Oh, look, this person is obviously awesome because look at all these great things that people have said about him." But he really was, because he was like so down to earth. He's just a car guy, hot rod guy, a nice guy. Just humble and awesome. I tell the story all the time about him walking up when we were doing the top speed shootout for road and track, and he brought his Corvette and whipped everybody. And then I was there with my Mustang, and he came over and he was asking me the question about the Vortec, and I'm like, "You're John Lingenfelter. Why are you asking me anything?" He goes, "No, I don't. We don't run these. We build stroker motors and 383s and these Excel Super Rams and stuff." He goes, "This is what we do." He goes, "But you're doing something different, and this is very cool. And I haven't ever done it, so I want you to talk to me about it." And it was it's obviously something that I will remember for the rest of my life. And he was great, because there have been lots of people that I've met that have been not that. Let's see. Earlier today, I was trying to ask, and then my thing spooled on me, and I don't know what. Eric Weingarter, that would be another good one too. Earlier today, I was trying to ask if there would be a noticeable difference in power with the extra runner length a spacer would add on a tall deck versus a standard deck without the spacer and the same intake. No, there wouldn't be. You should not be worried about a 1-inch spacer. Thinking about pulling an L18 that was first to the crash, so should be a good builder. Donald Wood from Rad Auto Machine in Massachusetts. Recall him in Carcraft. I don't think I know him. I haven't heard of him. Brandon would be cool. Brandon sent, just out of the blue, had sent me the M90 Superchargers for the stuff that I was doing. He didn't know who I was, and he's awesome. So I've sent him stuff. I sent him a cam for his deal and stuff, and Brandon's good people. Eric Weingartner had good things to say about Steve D. He said he's very intelligent, but doesn't come off that way on Engine Masters. He's the quiet one on Engine Masters, but he builds a good motor. He was a finalist in Engine Masters, in Engine Masters in the competition. He knows how to make power. So, Hugh, your brother had a picture of a balloon? So Smoky Eunuch, that would be a tall order. Velocity on intercooler atmospheric cooling is very important. I don't understand I don't know what your statement is in reference to. At 30 psi at 1200 wheel horsepower, is there a gain from 3.5 to 4-inch from the intercooler to the throttle body? No. Not if your intercooler is 3.5 inch going in and out. Evan Smith for some old school Pro 5.0 stories. Evan's good. I know Evan too. He's good. I know Evan and Campy. They're good people. In fact, I wanted to do something with them at MPMC, and we didn't get together. Tony Mamo, I like it. Tony's great. We used to give him such a hard time when he'd come into West Tech. Sean Murphy is good too. Sean's a really good guy to talk about quadrajets. With all his power, it'd be great to have a transmission and rear end specialist explain the weakest link. That would be good. Want to put a 4.3 in Nash Metropolitan. I've seen Nash Metropolitans like with big blocks and blowers and that kind of thing, and that Pro Street looking thing. I don't like that because I like the car and I would like to drive it around. I don't need a million horsepower in it because it's it's a little scary even with the power that it has. But a little twin cam turbo Toyota, more so that when you open the hood, it looks really cool. And with a 5-speed and stuff, you could actually drive it around. Not that I'll be taking long trips on it or anything, but it'd just be cool. Scotty from Haltech. I don't know him. Adam, I don't know who that is. Which track? I think it was. It wasn't. I don't think it was. Maybe it was Adams. It's out off of the It's off of the 60 freeway on the left-hand side. We need more 6-cylinder content. John Force, Eddie Hill, Gail Banks would be good. Oliver, you could do a smoky burnout in the Nova. That'd be good. Clyde Berg to talk VWs. There you go. How long does it take you to pull an engine from the wrecking yard? Actually, I don't have a lot of tricks for that. I'm not nearly as good as the wrecking crews that are out there. Those guys will just most of the guys that are doing it now are just hacksawing. They're sawzalling everything. They sawzall the whole front section of the radiator off. They sawzall the frame rails and then push everything forward. I mean, it's the way that they do it is pretty gangster. It's way more efficient than what I do. Demonology or Cletus. I've met Garrett before. Not Demonology though. So Burns, what you want to ask Turbocentric, because he doesn't seem to be interested in anything that I'm saying. What you can ask him, because he'll listen to you, is he talking about side loading or is he talking about scuffing? Because there's going to be a difference between those two. Richard, you should definitely stick swap the truck like you were talking about earlier. It would be good to have a stick in there. Did they ever offer any of these Silverados with manual transmissions? I've only done a few things on motorcycle engines. I helped my buddy Tom, who was setting up his 600 to go to, and by helping, I mean, I just did what he asked because he was doing all the work. I helped him. We did some chassis dyno stuff with it and did some filming with the strobe and watched the, so that we could watch the injectors. We could look in there and see, which is very, very cool. But he did things because he was setting up the 600 to run some land speed stuff. But other than that, nothing. I've owned a number of motorcycles, 6 or 7 of them. I have one now, a Trail 90. I haven't played with an L8T. Is an air to water more efficient for sustained power, like towing up a hill, or would air to water be better? I don't know how long you're going up the hill, so I don't know what the capacity is versus how much boost you're running and all of that. I'd need to look at that to see. Normally, if you're the higher the vehicle speed, the more that I would lean toward an air to air because you have a lot of capacity there. But for short stints where you're using the power for, a short period of time, I look at air to water. So Hugh, are you here to talk about car stuff or are you here to talk about the balloon? 1 inch spacer, I think, would be about 5/8 between the head and the intake. That's even less. I mean, there would be less of a difference there. Yeah, 5/8 is not something that I wouldn't make a 5/8 of an inch change in runner length and expect that change to be beneficial. Do you know Big Low from DNL drag from DNL racing? I don't. I did get to meet the guys from who is the guy that does the coverage of all the like donk racing and stuff. I met him at for the first time at MPMC. And I was talking to them. I was telling them how cool that kind of racing was. I like all kinds of racing. I like all kinds of weird stuff. I like lowriders and I like hopping competitions and hydraulics and all of that stuff is cool. I like guys making power and racing with electric cars and stuff. All of that's really cool. And I was surprised. One of the guys that was with him said, "Yeah, we watch your stuff all the time." I'm like, dude, that's kind of awesome. What kind of tester would you use to find boost leaks? Just a smoke machine. A smoke machine will do it. Compressed air we use also. Eric has this fitting that he uses to I think he might even do it. Where does he do it? It might go either onto the turbo and blow in from the turbo in so that we can kind of listen. It's mostly to listen kind of for leaks in the air-to-air intercooler and the discharge tube. But that's a good way to do it. I don't think that Westech has a smoke machine, but the compressed air seems to work. Richard, thanks for taking the time to produce the live streams. Every single time I manage to catch a live session, yeah, you answer a question. That's good. So I'm not just here talking to myself. I have a US gear underdrive for a 4L80E. Full tube chassis Nash. No, I don't want that. Nope, don't want drag race stuff. Want driving stuff. Long crank 4/8. That's right, Oliver. The early ones were. Who was I talking to that said that they had a 5-speed, an early 5-speed one? Somebody I know had one. Now that I think about it, that would be cool to have. And actually, what I'd like is if this was a 4/8 and not 4-wheel drive. So what I need to do is sell that truck and get something, find an early manual trans one. Lots of manual transmission Silverados, good. My truck's an 02. The last good year that they still had manual throttle bodies. Calvin's dad is doing okay. Car stuff. Someone mentioned a balloon. How do we decide on intercooler size? Well, I do it based on testing that I've done. So I know kind of what size we've used for what kind of power level and then what kind of results we got. And so that I would look at that. Ultimately, it'd be hard to decide between two otherwise identical cores. Like people have wanted me to do testing for like what they call China cores, like cheap ones versus good ones or whatever. The testing that I have up on the channel is we went from, I think it was a 3-inch in and out to a 3.5 in and out, and it's a bigger, thicker core it's a Procharger. It's one of the upgraded cores that they did, and we did it at about the 1,000 horsepower level, and it was worth a pretty good bit of power. The boost came down, the charge temperature came down, and the power went up because this was a centrifugal blower that we were blowing into it. It was a D1SC, I think, and that's the time that we made about a little over 1,000 horsepower with the D1SC, which is the most that I've done with that particular supercharger. I'm having a hard time keeping up with too many off the wall questions. There is, but that's the thing about these live feeds is that you can ask whatever kind of question you want. Ford F-250s were available until 2011 with sticks in them. Do I need an oversized for short highway pulls? An oversized what? Intercooler? You need one that's sized for the power level and the heat rejection that you're trying to use. Donk Master, that's what it is. Takes about 2 hours to pull one if you stay focused, pull the fenders, and yes, cutting will speed things up if you don't need the wiring. Yeah, and we don't ever need the harness or any of that stuff because we just cut that out of the way because all I'm interested in really on these, when we get these things, are hard parts. You get a chance to play with an EcoBoost, that would be good. I've only done chassis dyno stuff with those. It's hard to ask some questions with the minimum characters that are allowed. That's true. It is. I don't remember. I don't know what the maximum number that they have. $455 Buick, board 30, aluminum heads 11.7, headers, full exhaust 950. That's a good combination. It's Jay Leno. Yeah, I'm sure my people could call his people. His guy that he has that takes care of his car collection and stuff has been to West Tech a few times, and he comes over and they've run some of Jay's stuff over there. Oh, Jason, now that you mentioned that, he said I made a smoke machine from a Halloween smoker. I have one of those that we use. I actually do have a smoke machine, not one for testing stuff, but I do have a smoke machine that generates smoke. So it will fill up it would fill up this whole room fairly easily. And I bought it so that we could do some fun stuff with the smoke. If you ever saw the show that I did with Chad that I produced, so I'm not just the talent or lack thereof. I'm also a producer and a director. But what we did for the intro for that is I filled up the dyno cell, filled it up with smoke, and then Chad and I basically opened the dyno doors and walked out, through the smoke and acted like we were cool. Can you run a turbo 350 trans on an LS? Yes, you can, but the distance is different. The bell housing works, but you have to get some kind of adapter or shim or something, spacer or get the right flex plate or something. Somebody let him know about that. How much horsepower would you run on stock 5-liter forge rods on a 93 engine? I don't know. I think we've done on stock rods on a 351, we've done well over 1,000 horsepower. I think I'm going to build a 557 Ford for my Chevy Dually next. That's the nice thing about I have to say about the 460 Fords is that you can make them really big with the stock block, which is something you can't do with a Chevrolet. Is the GLH staying with a stock intercooler? It is initially, but we'll do intercooler upgrades for testing. Doing a Corvette servo, my wife's Yukon. I want to see if she notices the difference. I noticed the difference in the Corvette servo that I have in my truck. I can tell how the thing shifts differently. How would you size an air to water? I would size it for the power level that we want. So, and again, I would go off of experience, and you can see the core that we use quite often. I have a couple that I really like from the guys at CX Racing. They have a single core that's like about this big and this big, and it's 3.5 inch in and out, I think. And I call that one the 1,000 horsepower core. We've made more than that, but that's a pretty good one for 1,000 horsepower or more. And that one from Procharger is the same thing. The one from Procharger is a little bit smaller, but I think that the tanks are a little bit better, and the inlet and outlet might be bigger. So maybe I can't remember now if the CX Racing is 3 inch in and out. I want to say that it was 3.5. I think I got the 3.5 one, and the ones from the Procharger are 3.5 in and out, and we've used those for 4-digit power level stuff. I wouldn't use that core for the Big Bang stuff. For the Big Bang, we run 2 of those CX Racings, although they're 2 of them together. So we blow into the end of one of each of those, and then they come out together. So this is a big dual core one. Again, I don't think it's really as big as I would want it to be for this 1,500 horsepower stuff, but it was cheap and it worked. Let's see. Has anyone tried comparing charge temps before and after an intercooler? Yeah, look at almost every intercooler test that I have up on the channel. I'll usually have charge temperatures before and after. It should easily knock 150 or more degrees out of it, depending on where you're starting relative to ambient temperature and how much boost you're running. Could you please tell my buddy why not to put electric turbo on his 3600? Does somebody make an electric turbo that would supply enough airflow for a motor of that displacement? Because the problem with an electric turbo is that think about how much power it takes to, let's say, spin a supercharger. So it might take, for 1,000 horsepower supercharger, it might take 250 or 300 horsepower to spin that blower at that combination of blower speed and flow and boost level. So if it takes that much, now think about what a 250 or 300 horsepower electric motor looks like. And so that would be a really big electric supercharger or turbo in this case. So it's really hard to do. Use the adapter off a 6-liter to bolt up to a turbo 350 or 400. Is that the little spacer ring that they had on some of the earlier blocks, on some of the earlier cranks? If you get an iron-headed LS, you don't need an adapter because then that has the same distance, right? That has that little, and I think I don't want to say that because I don't want somebody to ask me for them. But I'm sure that we took a couple of those off of those early motors that we used way back. How would you run air to water for a commuter or traveling and keep it consistent? My Sprint Turbo had an air to water on it. It had a 1 gallon, I think, plastic gas can and a pump and a secondary heat exchanger, like a transmission cooler or an oil cooler up front, and then had an air to water intercooler that we replaced the air to air that it had from the factory, and it worked much better. It had more flow and more cooling. It was better in every way. And I monitored temperatures both before and after for a long time while I was driving around because I did nothing but driving with it. I drove it and we drove it out in Vegas. So I drove it from Vegas to West Tech a lot, many, many times, and monitored all of that stuff. Your girlfriend's trying to sleep. Turbo Century, you should look for scuffing like that is a lot of times air fuel. So I would look at that. If you see damage at the top of the piston, you could look at timing also. But when we scuff a piston, usually it's a temperature thing. Sergeant, did you look in your book of uncle jokes for that? Yep, that's what we had. The plastic gas can is like actually genius for that. First of all, we made this like at the last minute kind of thing, and the gas can, since it's plastic, pretty good insulator, because that had to be sitting because we didn't have anywhere to put it. I guess we could have zip tied it somewhere else, but it was in the engine compartment. The thing that I hated about it was the opening in the gas can. It's like about this big or whatever. It's about perfect size to fit one ice cube at a time, because we were running ice water when we were running the land speed stuff with it. Yes, we were running land speed records with the Sprint Turbo, but when we were doing that back at the Maxton Mile, we had to put in one ice cube at a time, and it's, as you might imagine, it's fairly time consuming. It seemed like by the time I got the last ice cube in, all the other stuff was already melting. How much horsepower you gain from adding an intercooler? I don't know. It depends on your boost level and your power output and all of that stuff. The one thing that you add that you can't put a number on, well, you can because you have to buy another motor, is safety. Dean's out. Jimmy's in the house. It was hard to fit the ice, wasn't it? Just one at a time. For anyone who's buying roller rockers for big block Chevy, the Scorpions are about 80 thousandths longer than Crowder and Harlan Sharp rockers. The Scorpions barely touched the valve stem on the AFR 265s. I have seen differences. It's usually not in that direction. Usually it's in the pushrod cup dimension. But we have seen with the same ratio rockers from different manufacturers leave a different tip pattern, and apparently what you're saying is it's not even on the tip, so that would definitely be different, but they definitely leave a different tip pattern, so they're definitely a different length. In my mind, that would mean that they're a different ratio, unless they're drawing in the other side. Have you ever tested octane booster? I never have. I mean, we run octane booster from time to time on the engine dyno just to kind of make myself feel better. Like when we're running something on 91 and has high compression, or maybe we're running boost on it, we'll throw a can of the Lucas octane booster in it. Again, I haven't tested it because I don't have knock sensor technology to tell me when it's knocking, when it's not. About to put a mechanical secondary 4-barrel on my wife's car, automatic. What problems could it run to not having vacuum secondaries? Just that if you snap it open, it's not going to operate the same as it did with the vacuum secondaries. I think I'm going to have to change push rod length going from an E303 to a 274. I don't know. I don't know if there's a change in cam base circle between those cams. I don't know if there is or not. Her 1 point octane booster is only worth 1/10 of a point. Yeah, that's what I've been told. That none of those actually change the fuel from like 93 to 94. That they would change it from 93 to 93 something. Crushed ice was my jams. Yep. I like although I wanted to make that one even bigger. We have for Bonneville for the Civic, we had a 10-gallon cell in the trunk, a 10-gallon fuel cell. And so it has the big, it has the big lid that you screw off and so you can put fuel in it. And that helped. But even then, we were trying to put bags of ice in. So I never did it. But what I wanted to do is just make we wanted to cut out the plastic lid and put a hinge on it and just make it a flip deal so that we could, when we're putting bags of ice in, you wanted to be able to put bags of ice in, like just cut the bag and put the whole thing in. Concentrate race fuel works. I have heard that. I think the guys at West Tech have some of that. I have never tested it though. So to go ahead and close out our poll at 60% saying yes, they would pick an air to water. A 5-gallon water tank has an 8-inch opening. That's good size. And then the problem always was like at Bonneville, and then I've got to get going. The problem always was at Bonneville is that we'd have to go get the ice and bring it back in coolers and stuff. And then if you didn't make a run right away, or we would get enough, because you'd have to get, I think that 10-gallon cell would fit 12 or 13 bags of ice, because we'd fill the thing all the way up to the top with ice. And then we would put water in it, but we wouldn't fill the water all the way up. We'd fill the water, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches maybe. And then the thing would grab, that way it only grabbed cold water. And then we had a spray bar across the top when the water would come back in. So it would sprinkle over the ice basically, and then grab coolness on its way down. So we weren't just grabbing hot water as it came back in. When will you race at Bonneville again? I don't know. I have something that I do want. I have more stuff that I want to do there. Use an air conditioning system. Yeah, guys always bring that up about that. Seems like a really complicated system to me. We had temperatures under boost that were way under ambient air. So we were pretty happy with the results of what we were doing. When you'd go make a run and you'd finally get to wide open throttle and you could watch the charge temperature go down and not up, that was a good thing. You ever try a turbo blow-through setup on a non-intercooled LS? Are you talking about a carbureted blow-through thing or a blow-through fuel-injected thing? And you want to run E85 in it, and you want to increase cam duration to drop dynamic compression? If you're changing the camshaft, the thing that you should be thinking about is not dynamic compression. If you're changing the camshaft, you should be thinking about what the change in camshaft is going to do to your power production. Did you ever change the rockers on your 240, 260Z head? You had to use different lash caps. I don't remember what they were called to get the center pattern. I never changed rockers. I changed heads on mine. Engine coolant temp was 226. That seems really, really hot. I was surprised how fast ice melted. I only put 10 to 12 pounds. I was melted after a 5-second pull. My tank will hold 20 pounds. I can tell you that our 10-gallon cell filled full of ice will make a minute 40 run, and whatever time it was in there for sitting and going through staging and all of that stuff, and then make the run. And the thing was still full of ice, but when we got back, I mean, it had used some of it, but it was essentially still full because you could put beers and stuff in there if you want, and they would be ice cold. So it didn't go through it didn't go through that ice when we were doing our stuff, and we were at wide open throttle for, I don't know, at least a minute. I've heard a few say that much under 50 degrees intake temps makes no more gains. That's not true. You would want it as cold as you could possibly get it. When they were doing the and this will be the last one for tonight, when they were doing the compressed air supercharging, they were getting 100% gain in power at 7 pounds of boost because their charge temperature was actually below zero, which is really, really good. And you could run full timing and you didn't have to worry about detonation. It was actually kind of awesome. Richard, did you ever meet Racing Beat? I did. I didn't meet them out at Bonneville, but I went into their place before. My intercooler is in the manifold. This includes the time to drive up to the lanes, burn out, and make a pass. And on that note, it's time to go. It's Friday night. It's 9 o'clock. So it's time to go to sleep. Hopefully everyone's doing good, but I will be back in the morning. No trading tomorrow because it's the weekend. And so of the last 10 days, I didn't make 10 days in a row where I was up all 10 days. I was up 8 of them. So I was up 8 out of 10. So that's actually a pretty good percentage. I like that. It's not ideal, but it's not actually what I wanted. But it shows that at least I'm learning, which is good. That's why we're all here, right? And on that note, I will see you guys all tomorrow.